Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Francis, and today I'm having a conversation with an old friend, Ryan Arcia. Welcome, Ryan.
Thanks for having me.
So, do you want to give a short introduction, a little description of how we know each other? And
Yeah, so Francis and I met, I think, when we were 10. Um, we we met at that park on Garrison. What was the name of that park?
still,
Linville, doesn't matter. We met at that park. It was a homeschool meeting. I won't forget that. And then you and I became friends. Our moms became really close friends, still are really close friends. Yeah, and then we were homeschooled together, went to the same church, the same Novus Ordo church. And then our families your family went first, and then my family kind of followed right after to tradition with the SSPX. And then, yeah, we stayed pretty close, I think, all the way up until maybe the end of high school. And we kind of both just, we're kind of doing our own thing. You were on the path to the seminary. I was the black sheep of the family going to school. And yeah. And
I remember there was a moment where I don't remember if it was that I heard both of our mothers talking, but there was something happening where I heard, yeah, I think it was our mothers were talking, and my mom said, "Oh, it'll be so great. Fran will go to the seminary and Ryan will go to the monastery."
yep, I remember that conversation,
And
or at
yeah,
least hearing about it.
so that's something that you were thinking about doing at one
Yeah,
point, going to the monastery.
I went once and then I went again with you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, so Ryan and I were both homeschooled. We were a part of the same group, and they were all Catholics, right, in the group.
I think at first, yeah. I
Yeah,
don't know. The group's changed so many times.
I think you were a part of a different group before us, and then
Yeah.
we all came together because we went to the same church. And then I mean, there's I don't remember how we met all the other families, uh but yeah, we were going to the same Catholic church. And then, like Ryan said, we went to the traditional Catholic church, and then a bunch of other families followed after us. And it's funny, a lot of the families from that traditional church were homeschooled.
I'd say at least 80%.
Yeah, that was like the common thing. I mean, it's it's hard because there's so many things to talk about with that.
On
Like,
each subject. I know
yeah, I
you could
know.
go down so many rabbit holes.
Well, one thing that I think would be interesting for people listening and that have kind of heard me and what I have to say. I have two questions. The first one is, what do you think? Uh, what was your impression when I decided to go to the seminary? Like, what did you have any thoughts? Did you? I mean, I think at that point we were kind of separating a little bit
Yeah.
at that point, but what was going through your head?
I don't know if I remember like exactly when I heard that you had decided. I think you kind of remember that whole environment we were in at the time. It was kind of like everybody kind of wanted to know what path you were already on.
Mhm.
And even if you weren't like, yes, I'm doing this, at least maybe from my teenage point of view at the time, it was kind of like, oh, well, that person's gonna kind of end up going and doing this, and this person's gonna kind of end up and going and doing that. And for me, it was like, they don't know if he's gonna go become a monk or some hippie climber and living out of his van. And with you, it was like I just remember there being a point where I remember going, yeah, he's going to the seminary. And then when it was official, it was like, yep, Francis is going to the seminary. I'd say my first reaction was along those lines, like, yeah, Francis is, because of how I knew you at the time and how how devout you were. It was pretty clear like that was the path you were going to go. Plus, I mean, if I can touch on this topic a little bit, it was pretty clear that women were not of that much interest to you. Which of course at the time didn't make me automatically think that you were gay. It just made me think,
Yeah,
it just made me think, you know,
he's just holier.
he's just, yeah, somehow he's able to resist it. I don't know. Like,
He's
good for
living on a
him.
different plane. He must be
Yeah.
destined
Yeah.
for the seminary.
He must. How does he resist these urges of the flesh? I don't know how he does it.
Well, it is funny because I remember growing up and I was never someone to talk about, well, obviously I wouldn't talk about girls, but like I can imagine people thinking like either something's different with me or that I must be above all of that or some, you know what I mean? Like, because when boys are together, even boys from that church, you know, there's always the conversation of girls and everything, but I never did that. And I think it was mainly because I, first of all, didn't want to talk about girls, but I didn't have the vocabulary to really talk about what I wanted to.
That makes sense because your mind wasn't going there.
Yeah, I don't know. But it is funny. I remember there was a moment where I I was really taking religion seriously, and I think that it was getting to my head a little too much. Like I was starting to act, I don't want to say acting like holier than thou, but I was being led down a direction where I started looking down on people. I don't, I
That's so
like,
easy to do in that environment.
yeah,
So easy to get to that point
yeah, I know. It's,
because everything that you're doing is being validated by everybody in your world because that's all that who's in your world.
mhm.
There's nobody, there's nobody challenging what you believe to be right or wrong because the idea is that everybody already kind of knows because we've all read the books, you know. So yeah, you, I never really saw you as like looking down on anybody, but I do remember noticing like you kind of isolating yourself from people out of certain principles. You know, I could see that. I think even myself, you know, when I started going down the road with the girl that I was involved with as a teenager, you know who I'm talking about. When I started going down that road, I think that really that definitely, I don't want to say drove a wedge between you and I, but it was something where you and I could not relate.
Yeah, I do remember that particular moment where you were dating that person, and I never want to generalize situations or generalize somebody's behavior, even my own, because there's so many different factors that come into play. But I remember having a there was a moment when I looked at you and what you were doing, and I thought, you're not going down the right path.
For sure.
And I was thinking, I can't associate myself with someone who's not going down the right path. And
Right.
because in that world, you're focusing on your salvation. You have to, every decision, this is how I took my life at that moment. Every decision I made was life or death. Like this might be the beginning of my demise in the end, or this might be the step in the right direction to make it to heaven. So I was constantly assessing everything that was happening in my life, even my relationships with people. And so I remember thinking, okay, I just need to slowly separate. But it naturally happened afterwards because I went to college at St. Mary's. And
Yeah,
then
you're
I
half a
immediately,
country away.
yeah, exactly. So that kind of that physical separation made it easier, I guess. But
And at that point, I was already questioning a lot of things about, you know, the Catholic faith and the way I was brought up. And so there was a lot of things that I was holding back internally as well, in terms of like, I knew that I could never bring those kinds of questions up to, especially at that time. Now we talk about it all the time, but back then it was, I can't really open up to Francis about those kinds of things because there was like the feeling of getting rejected by a friend, and then B, like I just didn't think you'd ever even allow yourself to go down that path mentally, which I don't think you would have. You know what I mean? Like, you were so, what's the word? Not staunch, but like you were pretty firm. Yeah, you were pretty firm in your direction. And
Yeah, I mean, I think externally I did present that more than internally, but yeah, there was definitely no question in my mind about religion, about my faith, anything, and nothing was really testing that. And
right.
I wasn't even afraid to be tested because I thought that it would persevere. It is interesting, like our paths came together when we were 10. We were best friends for
Close
like
to a decade.
yeah, and then we separate, and then a few years ago we come back together, reconnect, and we're both in these uh totally different lives, but somewhat similar again.
Well, I was gonna say, it's totally different lives, but at the same time, very parallel.
Yeah. Well, before we get into the now, I think it's interesting for people when they hear of someone who left the church, decided to leave, whatever. The main question is why? Why did that person leave? And then comes the list of, oh, he probably wasn't praying enough. He probably, fell for a girl. He probably, whatever the excuses are, they have their list. So before leaving, what was your relationship with the Catholic Church? Like, did you believe?
Oh, 100%. I think my relationship, so it's a little complex. I just remember going to church since I was a kid. My dad wasn't baptized until 2004. So I would have been, I think I was like 15 or 16 when he was baptized. Your mom is his godmother.
Yeah, that's right.
Forgot about that. So for me, it was always just kind of like this thing that I did with my mom and my sister. And then of course, as I learned more, looking back on it now, I can see it with so much clarity, but I'll try to put it in the context of what I was thinking then, which was, okay, this is how things are. This is, this is truth. This is just how the world was made. This is the story I need to be given. Here's how I'm going to be saved, because at some point I'm going to die and go to hell. And I never had maybe not the best word, but like an intimate relationship with the church. For me, it was always just more like, these are the guidelines I live my life by.
It was more like habit.
And more regimented in my mind. More like, these are the things I need to do. Not so much like, oh, I love the artwork on the cast, on the, the chasuble, or I don't know. I have met a lot of people who have that sort of relationship with the church, where they're just like ingrained in the art and the culture, and they almost just love the story more than they love the actual like principles. And for me, I never really went down that road. It was always just rules. These are what I need to do. This is, I know I'm kind of breaking it down a little too much, but
I understand what you mean. Like,
yeah,
that makes sense. But I also remember this was my impression of you growing up, that you were kind of rebellious. Like, you kind of did your own thing, but you were attracted to spirituality.
Yeah, for sure. Especially in my early teenage years and beyond. Yeah.
Yeah. It seemed like you're saying all of that about the regulations. I think if we take a step back and look at both of our paths, I think I was the one who was more focused on following the guidelines and being the good boy. And
That's a good point.
Thing.
That's a good
I
point.
think you like the structure, but you tested the structure a lot. That's what I said.
Yeah.
And you weren't afraid. Like, I remember there were moments when the priests that we had when we were first introduced to tradition, like I remember, oh yeah, whole other conversation.
Whole other conversation.
But I remember thinking, well, I remember wanting him to see me, like wanting him to recognize what I was doing or something. Like it was, he was like my hero. So in a sense, like you want to have that connection.
Yeah.
But I remember he would say things like, Ryan, did you see what he was doing? He's doing the rock climbing. He's doing this. He's talking about God like this. And it's so, and I remember thinking like, Ryan is a jerk.
I already know where this is going.
No, but I remember thinking like, Ryan's on a different level than me.
Oh,
I remember thinking that.
Not see where this was going.
No, you didn't. No, seriously, I remember thinking, Ryan has reached a level that I haven't reached because I'm so focused on doing the right thing, not sinning, doing that, like focusing on that level. And you're trying to breach that and try to like experience religion more, live.
Right.
And,
right.
And so that it's funny because I don't think I've told you this, but that's how I saw you. And I remember being like kind of, I'm going to make up a word, Catholically jealous, envious.
It's a real thing.
No, but I remember feeling like I want to be like that too. So yeah, it's interesting because when you're describing how you treated the church, I thought, no. This was,
I guess I hadn't finished like my timeline. So when I was young and didn't have that connection to it, it was more like that for me. But as I got older and became more spiritual about it, I definitely learned and still hold this true today, that God or whatever that energy is that people choose to praise or look up to, or however.
This is where people turn this off.
Yeah. Click. Cancel.
He said, whatever that energy is.
Whatever that energy is. Done.
Hey, if you're still here, like the video, subscribe, and thank you for thank you for continuing to watch. So keep going.
All right, so on with my heathenist tirade. No, I learned, and I still hold this true to myself to this day, that God, the supreme being, needs to be felt as much as and experienced as much as he needs to be known. And when you're young, you're taught to just know it,
or accept,
or accept it. Yeah, knowing's not even the right word.
It's accept.
Just kind of
just do it.
Just go with it. Like, just go with it, kid. Come on. Like, to me, if you summed up all the like centuries of Catholic indoctrination, that's kind of what it boils down to, is like, just go with it, man. Everybody else is doing it. Just do it. But yeah, it became very clear to me that I needed to experience, I've told you this before, and a lot of people are going to disagree with me, and I'm sure they're going to quote many, many books and St. Thomas Aquinas and all that, St. Augustine, but I never believed that the Catholic Church really described to me in any way, shape, or form what God is. Like, what is the nature of God? Not even the nature, but like, just what is it? And as I've told you before, I've found answers that maybe aren't correct, but seem much more logical down other paths. I have not stuck or abided by those paths by any means, but I just felt that my relationship at the end became more of an overbearing parent, kind of always checking, like a helicopter parent, and when I finally had the realization that, well, wait, I'm an adult, not only in the true sense, but in that sense as well. Like, I have the ability to make the decision to not accept this overbearing parent, and of course that opens up a whole other can of worms. But yeah, that's kind of to put it simply, that was kind of my transition. Regimental as a kid, realizing my own spirituality and like connection to the divine, and then kind of realizing that those two things are separate. At least for me, you know, as far as religion and spirituality, they can be the same thing, but they are not by definition the same thing. And yeah. And then that just kind of, I'm not going to say I was ever on any one path. I seem to have spider webbed out.
Well, I remember like going back to what I said about you being very spiritual. It seemed like not that you were necessarily at the time searching for a different religion, but you were searching for just experiencing or gaining knowledge from different perspectives. So I remember that you were really into Buddhism and learning about the culture and the religion. I remember the priest was actually encouraging it to us.
Which is, looking back, is mind baffling. But yeah, I remember that.
But I remember this is what I was thinking at the time when I saw you doing that. I remember thinking, Ryan's not 100% convinced about Catholicism, and he needs to like go off and see what's out there, and then he'll come back, and then it'll be 100% in. He's like way past what I could do. That's
you got to go see how wrong you are before you can be right, kind of thing.
Yeah, but I saw the potential. That this is my mind back then. I was
right.
Ryan has the potential. Like when you said you were going to the monastery, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, like like that's so good. And then I remember I don't want this all to be about me, but I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, I got to go to the monastery too.
Yeah.
Because I was so off.
There's a spiritual competition in the Catholic world.
I was so like, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I was just like, is this what I'm supposed to do? Is this what I remember even when I went to the priest, this unknown, very influential priest in our lives. I remember
I feel like half the
went to
people
him.
watching know who he is anyways.
Yeah, it's okay. I remember when I went to him and said, I want to be a priest, I was more interested in his reaction because he knew all the dirty secrets. I was more interested to see what he would say than actually like stating my intention.
Right.
Isn't that interesting? Like it
is interesting. It was more about what he thought than what you wanted.
Yeah. It was like, Is this like testing the water? Like, is this
right?
Oh, it's a good reaction. So I'm like, oh, maybe this is what I'm supposed to do. Anyway.
Which in hindsight is like the worst way to test something, to like commit to it.
And you know what the funny thing is? I remember putting so much pressure on myself to do the right thing. And I have to look back and think I was a kid.
Yeah.
I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I was
Neither of us did.
Yeah. And it's just, you're trying to find your path, and there's really no one there to give you enough breathing room to figure yourself out.
You mean within the community?
Yeah. Well, just in the structure, it's like, this is you. This is what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. It's a very, it permeates all aspects of your life, even your social status, your self-worth, your self-esteem, how you see yourself going, how you see, like, especially in the world we grew up in that community, how everything's so like, there's us and then there's them. And somehow you have to magically balance this life and this life. But the people who are doing really well are the ones that are like living off the grid, not going out into that life.
Well, the ones who are doing good in their eyes.
In their eyes, yeah.
Yeah. Those were the ideals, right? The ideal families were the ones who were almost, I almost started speaking Spanish. Wow. The ones, I almost said casi. The ones who were almost, or yeah, almost completely separated from the world.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to the point where we hardly saw them,
Right,
you know,
exactly. Like they went to the store, but
and that was kind of it, you know, and obviously this is a generalization, but from what I witnessed and experienced, you know, unfortunately, a lot of times those families that are like that, you know, they got their problems too, you know, and a lot of times they're really deep and dark. You know, you know, yes, that family is, because one thing looking back that I really liked at the time, but looking back is just so ridiculous, that community really focused on like what was better food to eat and like what was better medicine to use. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm very much into like holistic medicine and trying different, you know, I'm of course a fan of Western medicine, but you know, I like exploring, right? As I did with religion. But now I forget the point I was getting to.
like they were into holistic. They were
Yeah. So, you know, so many people focused on that. And at the time it was great and it was good for your health and all that. But it was like it almost allowed for there to us not to focus on the bad things that go on in the homes that practice that kind of thing. Not It's so hard to not generalize.
I know that,
but you know what I'm referring to. Like,
yeah,
meanwhile, dad's at home smacking the kids and the mom around because he's the male and he's the superior in the household and he doesn't know how to control his emotions because he doesn't talk to anybody but his wife and his kids, you know.
yeah.
And that's a very specific situation, and I think you know who I'm referring to.
But you know, there's a, I remember seeing this in people. There's a, because you know, you get closer to certain families over other ones and you see how they act within the community and how they are outside. It's like you can breathe and talk openly with people, and then that's when you see that people are normal when you're
Yeah.
outside of the community, when you're
Yes.
one-on-one during the week. But on the weekends, there was this pressure to live up to an impossible standard. So nobody knew each other, not unless you knew them outside of the church. You didn't really know the other people. It was like, I have to be the perfect husband. I have to be the perfect wife. We have to raise our children in this way. We have to wear these clothes. We have to listen to this music. We don't watch movies. We don't have a TV. Actually, we don't even have a cell phone. You know, all these different things. And
It's almost a masquerade in a way of just like everybody shows up and they put on who they are when they're at church.
yeah,
But they're not necessarily that same person all the time. And I mean, that goes for everybody, not just people in the community we grew up in. But it's funny.
That's something that I want to talk about later
Sweet.
Is how the experiences that we had in the past affect our perception now, because that's a huge subject. Like what negatively
impacted us
in our, but impact us now, and what positively impacts us. But
right.
So what specifically was the moment that you, I know it's an avalanche that begins with a little pebble, but what was kind of the main impetus for you leaving religion?
You mean like the kicker? The thing
well, like what, if you were to generalize it, how would you describe it?
Gosh, that's tough.
Because I know, well, I'll explain it for my perception.
Sure.
Like everything had already changed before the moment of deciding to leave. Like for me, leaving was like just like so easy, because there was like, obviously I'm going to make this decision. It was all the decisions and what happened before that brought me to that moment. It wasn't like, should I leave? Should I not leave? Should I leave? Should I, you know, it was just, well, I'm leaving.
Yeah. I would say the biggest thing for me was that I just truly did not feel that I believed what the Catholic Church teaches. Like it got to that simple point where it was like there was little things within the doctrine that I was like, okay, well, that kind of, that doesn't make sense. And then those things just kept adding to the point where all of a sudden all the bases are covered. And it's like, well, wait, none of this is making any sense to me anymore.
Was it something like, I mean, did you ever ask somebody to kind of clarify the doubts or anything like that? Did you investigate?
Yes.
Did you?
Yeah.
I know that you did. I just want to
Yeah.
make sure that the people listening know that it
No,
wasn't just like, I don't believe in this, therefore.
Therefore,
You know?
bye, because I know everything now. Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely did. I mean, I did a lot of my own research. Honestly, I probably did more of that than asking people, because I was already in this position where I just knew that the people around me were going to just reinforce and be a broken record on all the things we've heard before.
I understand.
I knew that there wasn't going to be anything new of value to me.
Like
but
they'd say certain words and it would like trigger them for a response, and it's
or they use certain words where you hear it and you go, okay, you're just regurgitating,
like you don't understand. You don't.
Yeah, you're just parroting what you've been told, and what you've been told is the right thing. Yeah, for me it was everything about it. Not everything, but in terms of like I've told you this before, and I know a lot of Catholics are going to be like, well, of course he has a problem with that. One of the first things I had a problem with was confession. I did not feel, and I think you felt this too, it was like, okay, isn't this supposed to help? I keep coming back to confession with the same sins, and I keep doing the same penance. And yes, it's definitely we have to make the decision to make the change too, right? But I think especially in our case, those sins were so carnal and biological, that of course you can't just slap a prayer on it and some words and be like, get out of here, kid, you'll do better. And I honestly felt like, okay, confession is supposed to be a communication between me and God. But especially in the community we grew up in, that priest's personality dominates that space. And after a while, I stopped feeling like I was hearing the words of God, and I was hearing the words of this human being. And then that's when I started to realize this is about the person who's telling it to me, not God speaking to me. And maybe that's God's way of speaking to me, but I just didn't feel the need anymore. And you got to understand, this is also compounded with my belief that we are not born innately evil. We go to confession because we're told you're innately evil, you're born with sin, go get, go take care of it.
Well, it's funny because as you're talking, because I did go to the seminary and I did study all of this. So yeah. I already know how people are going to respond, and they're going to hear your words and automatically sign you off as this type of person. They have a category for Ryan, and they just throw you in there with everyone else because you say something like I kept falling in the same sin, and
I'm a weak. What did you get called last week or the week before?
I don't know, like
a weak princess or something like that.
A prissy queen.
A prissy queen, yeah. I'm a prissy queen now.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. That's neither here nor there to me.
Well, it's funny because I think, there will be people that think like that, which is fine, because what people need to understand, and what, as adults, we should understand this just from experience, that everybody's lives and if you say one thing, there's so many other elements to that you can't see that are behind it, but people are only reacting to the superficial. So you saying that, people will just attack that, and you're like,
right.
Well, wait, but there's this and this and this. Oh, once you get to know somebody, then you realize why they made certain decisions, and even if you don't agree, but you understand it more. And
right.
I think that's what's important about having these types of conversations, that you hear somebody's experience and how they came to certain decisions, what was going on, so that people understand that it's not just, these categories of people who, the apostates, the ones who leave the church are for this reason or this reason, or, just throwing them out.
Yeah, I know. I see more of what you're saying now. The church has its own categories for people who left.
Yeah, they're like,
That's what you
because
see.
this
I've been
is
out
what
of it for so long. I forgot all about that,
no,
but
this
now
is
I remember
what
what you're
happens.
saying.
Like you hear someone that they left the church, and this is the Catholic's mind. It's like, it's either for this, or this. Okay, it's a man, so it's probably for something sexual, maybe drinking or drugs, maybe, there's like certain things that then you just narrow it down, and then you're like, oh, it's a woman, so that's
Yeah.
it. Now I know.
Yeah.
He was a weak person who couldn't control himself, and that's it. And
Yeah.
that's what people do. But I think that's
It makes it easier for them to not question their own faith.
well,
If you can just put someone in a box right away instead of having that situation in your face all the time and trying to figure it out, you may actually end up questioning your own beliefs, having to sit there and deal with it. But if you can just be like, oh, they're an apostate, like I'm not going to talk to them anymore.
but it's interesting.
So,
go ahead.
no, I was just going to say it's just a cop out.
It is a cop out. And what's funny? They do that after someone leaves, but
not to their face.
no, but they do that. They think like that about someone who left. But on the other side of the coin, if someone remains in religion, they still have categories. They still think in a certain way, like this person is this type of Catholic, this person is this type of. No one ever penetrates past those types of ways of viewing the world and viewing relationships. It's not the individual in front of me. It's, whatever, my brother in Christ, this person.
It's not this individual in front of me. It's not the soul in front of me. It's how they fit into the machine.
Yeah. And if someone's going to mass, it's like everything must be perfectly fine in their life because they're going to mass.
Yeah.
Like they don't care. They don't care what's really going on in your life. They don't. I mean, if you have a personal relationship with someone, that's different. But in general, it's not really a community in the sense of like we're all really helping each other. But it's more like we just exist together.
I think a better way to describe those Sundays a lot of the times was like a family reunion. It's everybody just kind of had to be there because
that's
yeah.
And then like if two families were fighting, one of them would leave after mass, and then awkward silences, and
it was a weekly thing for a while, and then I feel like it eased up after a bit, but
there was waves, always waves.
Yeah,
the drama.
That was honestly, looking back, and maybe it shouldn't have been, but for me was kind of a big deal, and one of the reasons I started to question a lot of things was everything revolved around the people. I started seeing that the focus wasn't so much on God. Like you did that because it was your responsibility, not because you wanted to, and then now we're all just like a part of the same club, but not really here for each other or anything like that. It definitely started to feel more like, wow, okay, are we here for our connection to God, or are we here for, impressing these people, or, am I here for Miss So-and-so's apple pie, or, like, am I here for the 14 bottles of wine being poured after midnight mass? Like, not that that's how people thought, but I just started to see the disconnect of like, okay, there's people, and then there's people practicing religion, and then there's religion. They don't all intersect.
Yeah.
Did
when you were considering going to the monastery, like what was going through your head at that point with religion? Like, did you feel like, I'll just ask you.
Yeah, no, I felt like it was my responsibility to go see if the religious life was for me. I felt like
Why did you think that?
um because I didn't want to just ignore it completely and ever regret not trying it. I know that sounds kind of vague and not maybe very direct, but like
Did you feel like there was a connection that you had with?
definitely with the contemplative side of things. I mean, you remember me. I had a little altar in my room. I, lit candles, said prayers. I would do I would pray from, gosh, I'm forgetting the name of it now. Uh
The
what are the
divine
prayers?
office?
Yeah, so I would pray the divine office at night. I really liked that practice of making it personal to me, not, I know this is going to piss some people off. It's kind of hippy dippy, but like, I didn't feel a personal connection to God at church. I felt like this was kind of the requirement. And then when I was at home in front of my altar, praising God and praying to God for my reasons, it just felt so much more personal.
Mm.
And I felt like at a monastery, I could focus. I mean, in a way, if you look at it, it's kind of selfish. Like you just want to focus on your own soul. Well, a priest goes out and he not only has to focus on his own soul, but he's got to go focus on all the souls he's assigned to. It in a way it was.
I definitely remember people going to the monastery because they didn't make it into the seminary. Like I remember there was a joke. It wasn't a funny joke, but it was a joke that went around that if you weren't smart enough to be a priest, then you would go to the monastery, which is
So
ridiculous.
So bad.
Because there's a lot of priests out there who are not very intelligent. I'm not saying that I'm intelligent, but I definitely, anyway. And then there were people who were running away from things. They wanted to have the very strict structure, and they wanted to not have the complications of the life that was around them, all the problems that they were experiencing. They wanted to escape in a certain way. And then you have the ones who are actually trying, they actually want to do the right thing, and
Right.
and they want to pray for themselves, for the church, for everything. I saw all of those types of people, and it's pretty obvious to see.
Well, what was interesting to me was I, like, looking back on it now, and this is not trying to be petty or anything, but like it was pretty clear to me that the difference between seminarians and monks or men at the monastery, because not everybody at a monastery is a monk necessarily. One of the reasons I think I was more attracted to the monastic life was, though, in my eyes at the time, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, those were masculine men. Like those monks, like they, in general,
well, especially that order, they were
like hardworking, work and pray.
right?
And the work they did was not, sitting at a desk. Those guys work, whereas the seminarians are more boys. In the sense that, I mean, obviously because seminarians are younger and monks can be at the monastery until they're gone. But I just felt like I was surrounded more by, like, you remember me, I was still am very like outdoorsy, adventurous kind of thing. So like what the monks were doing was like,
exciting.
Yeah. Like I'm going to be so distracted. I'm not going to have to worry about my sexual desires, because I'm just going to be so like in it and doing things that I love that I'm not going to be distracted by that. Whereas if I had gone to the seminary, I know that my interaction with people would have been a bigger part of my downfall.
Given that you remained in Catholicism, it means that you were trying to do the right thing. You were trying to get better, to overcome the obstacles, the temptations, or whatever. Was there, when you decided to leave, did you feel like you were just giving up? like when you're working for something and you're trying and you're trying and you're trying. I'll after you answer, I'll give my answer to what to how I felt at the time. But there's this perception that people who leave, for particular reasons, it's because they're weak. They just couldn't go one step further. They, whatever, they just gave in to themselves. But is that how you perceived yourself at that moment, that you just kind of were like, I can't do this anymore, I'm just going to do something else, this is ridiculous?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, there was definitely some guilt for leaving, even though I knew I was doing the right thing for me. But that guilt honestly wasn't directed towards God. It was directed towards my family.
Okay.
My connection to the church is through my mother. She's the one who made it such a point to raise me Catholic, because her father was Catholic. And so that was where my guilt lied. I really didn't have this feeling of like, man, I'm leaving the church. Like, what's the church going to think? That was not at all what crossed my mind. My issue was the separation it put between my mother and I. My mom and I, our relationship, we were very close throughout my entire childhood, well into my teen years. My dad was traveling for work a lot. And then when my two younger sisters were born when I was a teenager and my dad was traveling a lot, I was kind of I don't want to say the man of the house, but like I was the oldest and I was the one helping my mother the most.
And she confided in you.
And she confided a lot in me because she didn't really have anybody else to talk to other than your mom. That was the hardest part, I think, for me, because now my relationship with my mom is a lot better. But there's always going to be that, even if it's as thin as a sheet of paper, there's always going to be that thing in between us now. Yeah, it's not. I'd say my mom and I, it's close. And I can even talk to her just about things going on in my life that I know she probably isn't comfortable talking about. But I've got to that point with her, which is further than I was before. Because I would never talk to my mom about those kinds of things, back then. Mm-hmm. But now we have this understanding that like, hey, I'm an adult, I'm a man now, I need to be respected. And I don't harbor any sort of animosity towards my mom for the way that she brought me up, so that was, I guess to make it clearer and more finite, I did not have guilt towards the church or like God. It was more because I knew where I stood with God at the time. At that time when I left, I still very much believe in a God in the sense of how Catholics see him,
a person,
as a personality, in the image of a man, all the classics. I still viewed him in that way. I just didn't believe that the human beings put in charge of his word had done such a great job up to that point. So, I was good with God. It was my parents. That was the hard part. Sorry, kind of went off and talked in circles there, but
no, it's, I have to agree with you that I had the same ideas when I left. It wasn't like I was waiting until I could leave and then it was like, woo, now I could do whatever I want. That wasn't even in my head. It was, I was so focused on figuring out what the heck was going on in my life that separation was a moment for me to focus on myself. Oh, I hate when people say that, but really to go find therapy. Actually, next week, I'm going to be talking to my therapist for the channel.
Oh.
And don't worry, it's not about me. It's not going to be about my situation, but she helped me a lot. But it was like a separation in that sense where I could figure out what was happening and kind of refocus myself. And the guilt came. I'm somebody who, ever since I was little, I did one thing wrong, even the tiniest thing, and I acted like it was the end of the world. Like
I
if
kind of remember that.
like I was so sensitive to those things and always trying to do the right thing.
I remember when we would, sorry to interrupt you, but I remember when we would get in trouble as kids, you were always the one to, I don't want to say rat us out, but
Oh my
in those
God, that's so funny.
in those situations, it was always like, Francis, don't say anything. Francis, don't. Francis said something.
Yeah.
It was great. We deserved it, but it was. I just remember, and I never held it against you or anything, but it was always like, Francis is going to say something because
Oh
he's going to
my
be the
God.
first to feel bad about it.
It's funny. There was a time. So when I was maybe 13, it was before going to tradition. So I was at, this person, this guy's house with his family. I think it was his dad's 50th birthday or 40th birthday. I don't remember.
Was I there?
I think you were there, but
Was it the party we went the one time I went to this kid's house?
and then I stayed over the night.
Yes.
Okay. So that's
And
as
one
much
of
as
the-
information.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, never mind. I think we're thinking of the same day.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was there over at his house and I watched The Matrix and I watched Final Destination 5. Or no. 3, 2 or 3. 5 just came out a few years ago. Anyway, I saw one of the Final Destinations and the Matrix movie was something that specifically my parents said, no, not until you're 18. And then the other one had a woman flash the camera or something. And I remember the whole time I was watching it, I was like sweating. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm the worst child. I'm sinning. And then all that night I couldn't sleep. And the next day I went and told my parents. Like I could have just gone on and been fine, but I always wanted to make things right. I
Right.
didn't want there to be anything, even if it was not something that the other person would never find out. I knew that it existed.
Yeah. Yeah. There was that time, which I wasn't really involved in that. But I specifically remember the time we were at your house. And I think we were younger. I think we were 11 or 12.
Be careful, Ryan.
Well, you can edit this story out if you want, but I think it's funny because of who you are now. Well, you were that person then, but who you are to the world now. I remember we were in your living room and it was really late at night. And on this one channel, really late at night, would come the infomercials for Girls Gone Wild. And
oh boy.
you and I would sit there and watch it and just comment and like feel like we were getting away with something, because we would turn the volume way down and we were seeing girls and they don't even show anything. There's no nudity at all. Everything's blocked out, but so looking back, it was just like so dumb and innocent. But we connected on that. We like had a good time with that. And of course I went to bed thinking, well, that was fun, and then waking up, going home, and then hearing the phone ring and my mom being like, what? All right, I'll have a talk with him.
They were watching an infomercial?
They were watching an infomercial of not naked women. And I just remember, I didn't feel like betrayed, but I just remember being like, damn it. Yeah. Francis got us in trouble.
Yeah, I did that so often. And I remember just in general, that type of environments, they were so sensitive to anything sexual. Even like
that's a whole episode.
Innuendo, like that's very like just any hint of sexuality, it was like the worst possible thing that could ever happen in the world.
Oh yeah, you could sit there and watch like someone get beheaded and you'd be like, yeah, they did that back in the day. Or like that's like a Catholic parent would much rather have their kid watch a beheading than have them, not every Catholic parent, but you know what I'm saying, would much rather have their kid watch a beheading than watch even a mild mannered sex scene.
Yeah.
And it's so strange to me, that's why I said that the subject of sex we could have multiple episodes about how Catholics view it. But for me, that was definitely one of the hardest things. And we've talked about this. I realized my sexuality, and by that I mean how prevalent it was as much as who I am, as a part of who I am, at kind of an early age. And of course, as a man in the Catholic Church, you're taught that, like, go out, spread your seed, good man. And if you're not going to go into the religious life, and get a woman, have a family, that kind of thing.
With 20 children.
With 20 children, all in the same flannel shirt, and I think it's just crazy to me because my focus on sex was the most intense when I was still within the confines of the church. It was like a desperation. Whereas now I'm living this secular life, and yeah, it's a part of my life, but it's not this thing that, like, has this huge taboo around it, or is something that it's just completely different now. I'm not as intense about it.
Like, by making it taboo, like even mentioning the SEX word, making it something that, like, exists, but we're not going to talk about it, even though you're experiencing all of these feelings and impulses. We're just going to pretend like they don't exist. Or at least you have to show that it doesn't exist or whatever. You're saying in that type of environment, it made it more intense, and you were focusing on it more than now, when, practically speaking, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah. And this is something I think I want to say. I've told you this before, and I've told it to other people. But I think a lot of traditional Catholics will relate and may not have heard it put this way before, but I'm sure a lot of other traditional Catholic men have had the same experience, maybe even traditional Catholic women, who, before we joined tradition, we went to a Novus Ordo church, and girls wore jeans.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't a thing. It wasn't anything I paid attention to. I wasn't looking at them in a lustful way.
Yeah.
I wasn't, there was none of that. It was just, that's the girl. She's pretty. It was clear who had a better body than others, but you can see that in a dress too. You don't need jeans to figure that out.
You weren't focusing on the jeans.
Right. I wasn't focusing on the shape that the jeans were enhancing. Yeah, right. Whereas shortly after I started getting told, once we went to tradition and we were told, oh, it's so funny looking back on it now, it's so clear to me, but it's like, they would literally sit you down and be like, do you see how the lines in the pants are pointing down towards the crotch, and how the lines in the back are hugging the buttocks?
They're training you how to get aroused by looking at jeans.
Yes. And the whole time I'm just like, okay, whatever, like that's interesting. You make a fair point. But then after that was when I would catch myself like, oh, hey, oh, no, like catching myself looking at women in a lustful way who were wearing pants like that. And I noticed it right away.
Was it really lustful? This is something that
No, it was simply a biological curiosity is what it was.
It's interesting because I look back at myself and how I approached temptation, and I'm sure people will say that it was scrupulous or whatever. I say that from my perception of Catholic doctrine and what I was taught, I was just trying to do what I was supposed to do. So if people want to call that scrupulous, then maybe they should try to be a better Catholic, whatever. But I remember, because I was hypersensitive to those, like the spark before a temptation, like things that weren't or shouldn't be a temptation became a temptation. So for example, when you have this environment and this type of structure that you perceive the world through, I I would see things like Greek statues, and that would I would be like, oh my gosh, oh my god, and those things became temptations for me, when in reality the human body should not be something that is seen as lustful, or that shouldn't be
Yeah.
the first thing that you think about, but and I'm not saying that people who are on the other extreme who really do have a problem, like that, they shouldn't try to have control of themselves, because I'll say that now as much as I did before, but it was inside that structure that it became an obsession.
Yeah. Don't push the big red button.
Yeah.
That's what it is. I think I was talking to somebody about this the other day. It might have been you, but when we had our long phone conversation the other day. But to me, it's kind of like the DARE program at a school. Or no, I was talking to my mom about this. To me, it's like the DARE program at a school. I'll never forget.
What is that for people that don't know?
So for people that aren't aware, I think it means drug awareness, something. I don't know the rest of it.
Yeah.
But in most public schools in the United States, I don't know if they do it anymore, but back in the 90s when I was in elementary school, so just to make it clear, Francis and I were both homeschooled, but I lived in California as a kid. That's where I was born. And I went to a Lutheran private school up until third grade. So in third grade,
public school until fifth grade.
Right.
Yeah.
So we weren't both always homeschooled.
Right.
So we had some experience in the public life.
Yeah.
But
we weren't totally closed off village people. Well,
no,
not village people in that way.
YMCA. Where was I? So
the DARE program.
So the DARE program. The DARE program was a program in the 90s. I think it lasted up until the mid thousands, that would come to public schools and talk to kids about drug awareness. When I was in third grade, I did not know what heroin was, what marijuana was, what cocaine was, what amphetamines were. But guess what? After a 1 hour class with some public servant coming in and teaching me about it, as a third grader, now I knew what marijuana was, what cocaine was, how you shoot up heroin, because
it's not what it is, but also how you use it.
Yeah. So don't do this, kids, but this is how you light it. And with the Catholic Church is the same way with sex. It's the exact same way, except they don't even tell you about it.
Right.
They just acknowledge that it's there and that's how all these Catholics exist. But nobody wants to even go down the road of like trying to normalize it,
this is something, how do you integrate sex into your life? Because I know for a fact that people, so boys especially, because biologically men are more sexual.
I don't know if I'd agree with that 100.
In general, they're more demonstrative.
Yes, we're much more physically intense about it.
Yeah. So a lot of the boys in our situation, because honestly, we grew up in tradition, but there's a lot of traditional type conservative Christian or religion that has very, very similar ideas. But the boys grow up told to not talk about sex, not focus on sex at all. It's a sin, it's horrible, it's disgusting. But then the only way to relieve that pressure is through marriage. So great way to start a marriage, because you have a sexually,
all the right reasons.
You have a sexually and mentally immature man who's getting married now and having to be responsible for a family. And when you have that closed off sexual urge, it messes you up. And I'm not saying that you should just, let it out whenever, but not being able to integrate it into your life in a healthy way. That's something that they never taught us how to do. It was the only way to integrate it is to not integrate it.
Right. I think there's that part of it, because you're absolutely right. It's not integrated into people's lives. It's kind of just like this thing that like you're supposed to put it on the shelf, but it doesn't quite fit on the shelf. So you kind of have to put it behind the shelf and you take it out when you need it, kind of thing. That's kind of how, that's my description of how the Catholic Church kind of puts it into a married couple's life. For me personally, I think that one of the biggest downsides, because you're absolutely right, there's so many kids getting married at like 20, 21 years old, 19 years old, 18 years old in that community. And let's be honest, yeah, sex for maybe the first time as a married couple is going to hopefully feel amazing for the two of them because it's the first time and now they're intimate together and all that. But neither of you understand at that point what the ramifications of that are and how, like, I feel like the Catholic Church looks at it like, okay, you've grown to this point where you can now get married. Your sex that's all your sex needs to be. Whereas from my experience, maybe we're getting a little too personal here, but from my experience, sex grows too. Your own personal sexuality, in the sense, not in the sense of your orientation, but in the sense of, how you practice it, grows a lot throughout your age. Your being able to please your wife or your husband at that age is going to be a very different thing than pleasing that same person 10, 12, 15, 20 years down the road. Because you don't know what you like. You don't know what you want.
Well, then it becomes like, well, the pleasure isn't the most important thing. Like, we're Catholics, we should be above the pleasure. The pleasure is there because God wants us to do the act, but we're doing the act and we're having children. So that's all that's important. And I think especially for the girls in that community, because they had to be seen as anti-sexual, not just not sexual, but anti-sexual, to not give off any sort of feminine qualities at all, because whatever would happen with the boys.
Well, visually feminine, right? Their idea of femininity is cooking for your husband and sewing a dress. Yeah.
But imagine the combination that must happen between a girl who was taught to be anti-sexual and then a boy with repressed sexual feelings coming together.
Yeah.
I mean, you're
looking at a possible disaster.
Well, there are a lot of disasters, and because you're married, you can't get unmarried. There's no divorce. Right. And then I heard so many stories. I know I've said this a million times, but I think it's good to say it again.
Yeah.
Here, that there's something that specifically told, and I don't know why. I mean, I imagine that it's because it happens a lot, but I heard in so many sermons or conferences or things like this, the necessity to give yourself to your husband whenever he wants it. And that's a way to offer yourself up to God and, all this stuff, because I imagine that girls don't understand their own sexuality because of that environment, just like the boys, but from a different slant. And they don't even know how to be like that.
They don't even know how to be a sexual individual.
Right. They don't know how to approach it.
They only know how to be sexual with their husband. Not that they should be sexual with someone else, but their sexuality is not separate from their husband.
And it's everything focused on the husband.
They
understand themselves, their own bodies. It's how to give yourself to your husband, how to do your marital, what's it called? The marital due,
marital duty or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so messed up. And I know that there's good, awesome families from our previous community who are really down to earth, good, and they have healthy, good relationships. But I imagine that they got all of that information outside of that community before they enter that community from other people who had real life experience and knew what a real relationship was, not
You
from
know,
what we were taught.
no, that, and you're so right. There's absolutely no focus on the woman's experience. Once she's pregnant, then it's all about her experience. You know, that's when I feel like the Catholic Church lets women have their moment. You know, it's like you get to be a bride, and then you get to be pregnant, and those are like the two times you get to shine. But your sexuality is your husband's, not your own. And
Ryan, one time I heard a story of this girl, and I'm sure this happens more than just in this one instance, but she said that she was so disgusted with sex in the sense of she didn't, from her background, she never knew, like, she didn't know really how to approach sex. And she felt like her husband was like always wanting sex and all this. That she was happy when she got pregnant because her husband couldn't be with her.
that's just like such a messed up. Oh man. Well, you are taught. I don't even know if we're like taught that it's gross. It's just that it's so
There's a
looked down
repulsion.
upon.
It's a
Yeah.
repulsion.
It's so looked down upon that your head just kind of goes there. Also because, you know, we don't visually get to see the other sex's genitalia until we're married, right? I mean, not supposed to. So
In theory.
in theory, this is hypothetical. Let's just say you haven't seen one. Oh God.
Let's just say that the internet never existed.
Yeah. Oh man, let's just say you've never walked into a gas station in South Carolina. So, but gosh, don't even know what I was talking about now.
It's okay.
I keep doing that. But yeah, the church just does this thing where sex is just such a topic of like, no, don't go there. Don't, like, that feeling you got when you saw the girl flash in Final Destination or whatever. I used to get that same feeling like if I was at a friend's house and a bad movie was on, you know, like not necessarily, not to the extreme you did, but definitely to that point of like, oh man, here I am. This is, and you get that feeling too of like, this is exactly what my parents said would happen. If I go on a sleepover, they're going to be a bad influence. And here I am watching an R-rated movie with them, you know, staying up until 2 a.m. You know, it like those things definitely, and it kind of sucks because your parents were right. But, you know, at the end of the day, they weren't wrong. But that's because they went through the same thing you did. They know, you know, what happens at sleepovers. They still let you do it, you know, and then you still get in trouble for doing it. It's classic. Yeah. But yeah, I definitely remember feeling like that about sex. And now I have such a more healthy relationship with sex than I ever did, simply because in my life, I'm able to, at least in my opinion, I'm able to balance it, you know, and put it where I believe it needs to be, put my energy into it when I believe it's beneficial for me and the other person involved, not just my own satisfaction. Like that's actually, and I'm sure some people listening will be like, yeah, sure, Ryan, but I put a lot of value into making sure my partner, and in my case, those are women, where the woman is always like getting just as much, if not more, satisfaction out of it than I am. Because I get a lot of pleasure and satisfaction out of watching them get satisfied and pleasure. I feel, you know, the Catholic way of doing things is not like that. You know, it's,
well, that's interesting that you say that, because I think that the way that you're describing that type of connection with somebody is something that you learned from the past, to have to be aware of the other person. Because I imagine, look around, I imagine that so many people have those types of sexual encounters with people and they don't care about the other person. They just want to get get
off.
off and
Yeah.
then move on with their life.
Yeah.
So I think this is a good transition to your present life. So I think what's interesting for me in looking back at everything that happened in my life is to see what retained in my life now, and what opinions do I have now, what principles do I have now that I can see the origin in my religious past, and what things were negative. But what do you think? I know this is a huge subject, but what do you think are some things that you've taken away from religion? Like, first of all, before all that, what is your how do you see your past now? In general.
In general, very positive.
Okay. So
I don't see my leaving it as like the end all be all. This is how I have to feel about it for the rest of my life. Like, especially being homeschooled, which is separate from the religious part of things, but kind of intertwines with our story because homeschooling was such a big part of that community. But in essence, they're separate. So, for me, having the moral compass is so crucial. I used to meet people who weren't raised religious at all. And I would meet people who were like that, who just, their family just had a good moral compass. So the way they were raised just made them good people. It's like they didn't need to be Catholic to be good people, and I started to see that more and more. And so I really cherish the moral compass that was given to me. I really cherish the respect for women, because there's a weird paradox in Catholicism, because I felt like they really were all about respecting women. Women are respected. These are the vessels of life, and then there's the whole other coin, right? When it comes to marriage,
it's like,
and sexuality.
In theory, women are up here, but in practice, it's a different thing. Sometimes, like, some of the practical applications don't follow that type of idea.
Not at all. Yeah. So the respect for women, which has helped me in my personal life, just also the appreciation for things that are important philosophically. Like, I don't know, I feel like if you're not brought up in a religious household, you don't even really go down those paths a lot. For us, like, I can read something from Islam and be like, oh wow, that actually means a lot, or there's a lot of truth to that, because there was a lot of truth to that in the religion I was brought up in, and I've seen it in a lot of other things. And
it's like a universal truth.
Right. And here's another thing, and this kind of plays on the education, and we talked about this a little bit. My understanding of the world today would not be what it is, which in my opinion is a very blessed way of looking at things, because I just have all the knowledge. But understanding church history and learning all, like, it's so hard to explain to the viewers like how in depth our education was within the Catholic Church, yours especially because you went to the seminary, but our high schooling was no joke when it came to we were reading canons and papal bulls in the 12th grade. I remember we were reading, you and I both had to read the the Marxist
manifesto.
The manifesto. We both had to read Karl Marx, the manifesto. We had to read A Brave New World, 1984. All these things that a lot of people in our generation aren't taught, unless they are interested in them on their own. And that, like, I look back on that and go, man, being Catholic, it is what it was. But one huge positive is, like, it really gave me a better bearing on why the world works the way it does today, because the Catholic Church kind of ruled it for a millennia.
But it's also like there's so much natural philosophy that's part of Catholicism, because when you have St. Thomas Aquinas, using the philosophical principles of Aristotle, who wasn't Catholic.
Right.
Catholicism didn't exist. But having that natural philosophy with logic, psychology, all these things that are integrated into the religion. I think, like, people ask me, like, why don't you just pick another religion? Why don't you find a religion that works with your life? And I'm like, listen, after you've had the education I had, I look at other religions and I automatically see what's wrong with them. I can't fool myself now, like trying to fit myself into a place where I feel comfortable. And it's like, no. I'm trained to see the world rationally.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. It's helped me survive, and it's helped me have certain peace in my life because I'm ordering things in a certain way, and I'm not moved by all of these things that are happening with politics and whatever else is happening, emotions. It's like I have the ability to see what's really happening.
Yeah, it gave us a really solid foundation in our understand of, like you're saying, of understanding what's going on around us, and understanding, like, even the tiniest thing, like, well, I've never heard that word. What's that mean? Oh, well, wait, I know what the beginning of that is in Latin. So, I know what the suffix is in Greek. So this is what it,
Yeah.
It's such a like scholarly way to put it, but like, it's true. Like, I know you do that because I do it all the time. Things where it's like, oh, I know that. And people around you are like, how did you know that? And you're like, oh, I only know that because I read Thomas Aquinas, or, I only know that because I was not forced, but I was told to learn.
Part of our education.
Yeah. So I'm not going to lie. And, this is going to be a moment of pride, but I definitely pride myself in those moments where I'm in like a group of people and they'll all be like, oh, who knows what that one thing is? And you're like, I know what that one thing is.
Yeah.
Because I learned about it in church or school or through the Catholic Church, whatever. So that's a huge benefit.
Yeah, there's that. I really like what you're saying, and I agree completely with having a moral compass. And it's not even, I don't know about you, but there was this perception I had it before that people create their own moral compasses. And people do that. You look around and everyone does that. And it's almost like I can't trick myself. Like, I can't convince myself that something is good when deep down I know that it's not good. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I understand that feeling you're saying, but I know that, this is a whole other subject, but I've definitely pushed my boundaries. And when it comes to those kinds of things,
yeah,
where right at the beginning, before I would have been like, dude, I'm not going to do that, and then you think more about it, you get opened up to it, someone else explains it to you in a different way, whatever, and you test it out. And then
that's different. That's you trying to figure it out.
I guess what it is everybody has a moral compass, but they're not all calibrated, and you need to calibrate them fairly often. Otherwise you're not always going to be going in the direction that it's pointing.
Well, for instance, so like before any sort of sexual act before marriage was wrong, and it's because not only is it disordered, but it also it's not going to make you happy because it's not ordered with love to a particular end that's good.
Right.
It's just what it is.
Right.
Especially like an anonymous hookup. So that's something that we believed before. And in my current life, I don't do that because I see, even though like I could just, call someone up. No, I'm just kidding. But like, there's so much opportunity to do certain things now. But I know that if I do those things, it's it's not gonna it's not a step in the direction that I want to go. So it's
It's not
like,
going to benefit you in any way, really.
right.
Yeah.
And so I can make those conclusions now, and I because it's based on something that's not necessarily religious.
Right. Yeah. That's always my thing too. Like, why do you need religion to be a good person? You know, the comment you made earlier about the person can say, you've had people say like, oh, why don't you just pick a different religion? It's like, well, first of all, if you're in that position where you feel you need to pick a religion is probably the last road you need to go down, because this isn't like a deck of cards
Yeah.
that you can pick from. Like, religion is supposed to be like this, not an end, but almost like this doorway into uh the end goal of your beliefs, right? But you need to find out what those are first. And you can't do that if you're being told what to believe.
Well, what you're thinking about in that circumstance with that person that told that to me, it's not you're not focusing on that end. You're not focusing on trying to find the truth. You're just trying to find something that fits into your own uh, requirements. Like, I
Right.
need to find a religion that's gay friendly.
Yeah. Well, and I guess for me, like, I'm looking at it from like a step back, which is like, why do you even need to find a religion? Like, ask yourself why
Yeah,
you're
that's
trying
another
to
thing.
find it, you
Because
know?
honestly, if you think that you need a religion, then you need to reassess everything in your life.
Right. You're already inside of a box that you need to be stepping out of. You know,
Well,
you need
it's
a
like,
paradigm shift at that point. Not saying that it's wrong to pick one of those religions. It's not. But if you're in that position where you're just like, I just need to pick a religion because I'm not agreeing with this one, like, why are you just going from one sinkhole to another?
because they're
You
focusing
know?
on themselves. That's it. But they don't even really know whatever. It's
Well, they don't know what themselves is because themselves has only ever coexisted with a religion.
yeah, maybe that's what it
Like,
is.
yeah,
Maybe,
like if you're gonna
well,
go
even
find,
how about this, Ryan? How about people that leave religion? Because I see this all the time. People that leave a very strict religion and then they just go into another movement and treat it like a religion.
that's because it's behavioral. They only know
Yeah, but they
how
have the
to
necessity to be connected to a movement that's doing something that's bigger than them. That's
right, right. One, I almost went down that road with Hinduism. Um, I never once like joined or anything like that, but I got very interested, and I was going to the Hare Krishna temple. I went there like twice in Honolulu. This would have been almost 10 years ago. No, this was 12 years ago. It's like right when I moved there. Um, but I did start to see the same kind of thing, you know. I got showered with love the first time I showed up. You remember that feeling of going to the church we grew up at, of just
yeah.
like, I've never been like accepted by so many people so quickly. Like, in the last 2 hours, I've made more friends than I've made in my entire life. It
And
was
the
very much
priest,
this.
well, the priest, remember, he focused on the new ones.
Yes,
He would
100%.
spend time
Yeah.
with the new ones. He would go have dinner at the house with the new people, and
You'd get about 3 or 4 months of them and then it'd phase
then
out.
on to the next family, onto the
Yeah.
new ones, onto the new
Yeah.
ones.
Which is just such, I don't know how I feel about it, but it's definitely just like a strategy, you know?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard for me because I know so many people from that community that are so good and so honest and are just trying to do the right thing, that it's hard for me to put um malice behind their actions. I think
Yeah.
that it's having that system, um like going along with the momentum of everything that's around them. Uh but but i i mean, I know a lot of the priests, and I think a lot of them are just trying to do the right thing.
I I would agree. I don't harbor any sort of animosity or think badly about, the religious and the SSPX or anything like that, other than the ones we know, have gone the bad way, but there are a lot of good people, a lot of good families, you know.
Our families.
Our families, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, everything is genuine there. You know, there's nothing, you know, I don't like when I went home October of last year, you know, they're practicing it just like they've always practiced it. It's not, nothing is different, you know. So there's good people with good hearts and good souls who are trying to do the right thing, and it's working for them, this path.
What was what happened when you actually did leave? Because you moved to Hawaii. You're currently in Hawaii. What's the island you're on?
I'm on Maui.
Maui, right.
Yep.
Um, and what was that like when because you're physically separated from everyone. I know that you tried to go to mass a few times in Hawaii.
I did.
I was calling the priest and like, did Ryan go to church? I'm totally
still trying to get me in trouble even then. No.
Well, no,
no, I know.
Look out for you, I guess. That's
no, for sure.
When I believe something, I'm there 100%.
Yeah.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I've received so many comments of people that I was manipulating that sure. Okay. So you have that physical separation, and then I remember you telling me that it was just like,
yeah, honestly, that's when I realized that it had more to do with my respect towards my family than my spirituality, than my soul or myself. Because the moment I was away from that area of North Carolina, there was no, like, I didn't miss it at all. Like, that sounds terrible, but I missed my family, of course, but I did not miss it at all.
Mm-hmm.
We got to kind of remember what was going on at the time too. This was 2010. January of 2010 is when I moved to Hawaii. The 2008 recession had just happened. Things weren't very good in the town we grew up in. A lot of our friends that we grew up with were going down the way of pills and, you know, hard drugs and stuff, and
things that I don't even know.
Right.
I don't even know.
Right. So, like, you know, I'm glad I got out of that situation, came to Hawaii. And yeah, the moment I showed up, there was just no desire to go to mass. Mm-hmm. It just wasn't there because I had already pent up all those questions that I had finally had the chance to give myself space from it. And I was expecting to feel like the need to go. Like, I've been doing this every Sunday for my entire life, which up to that point was 21 years, you know, every Sunday for 21 years of the most crucial part of your development. And I was able to just walk away. Mm-hmm. Still don't know how I feel about that. I know I made the right decision for myself. I have a tendency to do that thing. That's easy for me in a lot of facets of my life. The ability to just whoop, you know, we're done kind of thing. But when it came to the church, it was very much like I'm still a good person without going to mass every Sunday. You know, I still nothing changed about who I was. You know, that's what I thought was going to happen because I wasn't going to have this anchor every Sunday holding me down, I was just going to float away. And yeah, I went on a few long drifts, you know, but I was always able to come back to that person that is who showed up to Hawaii before I left the church. And I'm still able to do that. Mm-hmm. And recently, in the last, I guess you could say, year of my life, I've really come full circle back to who that was, without Catholicism having anything to do with it. Just being more in tune with who I was at that point, despite religion.
And that goes back to what we were saying too, that you wouldn't have had that base, like that guide to come back to.
Yeah.
If we didn't have religion. Like
exactly.
Imagine the people who don't even know where harbor is, and they're just out drifting in the ocean. They don't even know where to look to say, okay, now I don't like my situation. Now it's like rebooting your computer to a previous version.
Yeah.
They have a previous version. They just have to go with it.
There's no point of reference.
Right.
I think point of reference is probably the best phrase. It's like
Yeah.
at least we have a point of reference,
Yeah.
like, and we can adjust things, as we see the truths or the non-truths in them. But we have a point of reference. And I think that's one thing that I was going to say your viewers, but it's not all your viewers, but like a lot of people who make comments on your page and stuff who just automatically assume that like, because you left the church, especially leaving it as a priest, that you now all of a sudden have this disdain for it.
Mhm.
It's like people need to relax and, shut the what up and really understand that, like, look, this isn't about you. The whole reason they get upset like that is because they take offense to it.
Mhm.
This is not about you. This is not.
I'm not in my decision. I'm not attacking someone else's decision to stay.
And on top of that, you're still in a way not praising, but like holding all of that up to a very high regard in your life. And I think a lot of people don't believe you can do that. They think that because you've left, oh, now you must hate it.
Well, a
And
lot of people do. That's the easy way out. The easy.
Well, I think a lot of those people had much worse experiences than you and I did. To be fair, because that's one thing we haven't touched on yet. You and I got out of that pretty unscathed.
I think that maybe something bad happened to them, but they're not able to separate a bad situation from the whole idea. And because people are so easily connected nowadays, they build upon their own experiences, all the experiences of other people, and say, this is why I hate Christianity or whatever, because of all of this. It's even though their situation might have been traumatic,
right?
They're not able to see clearly and be able to distinguish. Because what happened with me, there was a lot of personal things happening, and I recognize that and I accept that. But there were also actions from other people, knowing or not knowing, that really effed me over in the end. And I can look at them and look at their actions and say, that was stupid. Thank you for almost destroying my life in every sense of that term. So I can see that, but that doesn't mean that I have to take, like, that doesn't mean my reaction has to be hatred.
Right. It doesn't need to be the polar opposite.
No, like, people say hate all the time and they don't realize the implications of that word and how strong that word actually is.
The gravity.
Because we say it's the opposite of love. It's the absence of love.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I think that it's important to be aware of yourself, of your situation, of your decisions, of the consequences of your decisions, accept consequences that come from decisions. Just like take a step back and be able to see yourself in the big picture and assess your situation in that way, instead of just I don't know, living on the superficial level of feelings only.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's kind of been my attitude throughout this whole thing, because people tell me you have enough that you could just, attack these people or hate these people, or you must hate these people. And no.
See, I got away with it so easy because I was a layman. I just slip out. No one noticed.
That's what happens.
No one noticed.
Yeah.
But when a priest leaves, the world's ending. Satan is winning, and that's the immediate reaction. And nobody, one of the biggest things, and this is not to like blow smoke at you on your channel or anything, but like one of the things that I saw was like, dude, your situation was impossible. There was no, like, my situation, if I was a good old boy, I could have stayed a Catholic, gotten married to a Catholic woman, had kids at 22 years old. I could have done all that because I didn't have any sexual boundaries that would have not allowed me to. In your case, it's just an impossible situation, man. Like, there was no, like, the moment you came to terms with who you were, and you understood that that was something that is not, you're not going to change, or you're not going to pray away, you know, um, like to me, that is much more pivotal than my situation. My situation was kind of more, you know, I didn't have anything necessarily pushing me away the way you did. You know, I kind of stepped away on my own. You know, I mean, you did too physically, but
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah,
yeah,
definitely like, and I'm somebody who's like, okay, just because you're gay or straight doesn't mean that you have to go crazy and be sex crazy
right,
and all that, you know?
right,
So in my head at that time, it wasn't that I was looking to be in a relationship with a guy or that I was looking to have sex with a guy. Like that wasn't even in, like, that's not why I left.
right.
Well, that's not why I left.
But people are automatically going to assume that.
Well, because that's what normally happens.
Right.
But the thing is, I didn't even know who I was because that aspect, but many other aspects were all coming together in that moment, and I had no way of assessing myself. I that's part of it. That's part of it. But also the fact that I put myself in a situation where I wasn't compatible with being a priest.
Right.
And it's not because I'm not a good person, because like I think I'm a pretty good person. That's beyond. It was more logistical
Yeah.
things, um but like I saw myself in a position, I was like, how the hell did I get here? Someone help me.
Yep.
And no one helped me.
Yep.
So
Well, in your situation, I just feel like people had no idea what to do.
that's
You know.
a huge thing, because
Yeah.
when you avoid the subject so much, because I'm realizing little by little, more and more that I hear from other people, um, that there has been issues in the past with other priests from the society who left the society um, because they were homosexual or like all this stuff. But why the hell did no one talk to me who was in confidence with me that I opened up to? Why didn't anyone talk to me and tell me like, hey, this has happened before and this is what happened and this is the no one talked to me like a human being.
And especially in your position where you had superiors. You know, you had very clear cut, this is who I have to answer to after God.
Mm-hmm.
You know. And
And it's supposed to be a safety net.
right. And they kind of just like let you fall, didn't put the net out. And we're like, did you see the net? I couldn't find the net. Did you find the net? Oh no, we'll talk to this guy about the net. Do you have the net? He doesn't have it either. That's what happened
Yeah.
to you.
And now I'm gone. So they're like, all right.
Yeah. Don't need the net anymore. Yeah. It's
Well,
crazy.
Well, what was just quickly before we end this really long conversation, but what was the reaction of people when you left? Like, you don't have to go into particular people because maybe whatever.
Well, to be honest, I don't really know, because when I left, nobody knew, because when I left, I was just leaving for Hawaii. Nobody expected that I was just going to stop going. And then when I would come back to visit my family, of course, there would be a Sunday involved, and I would go to mass with them, just, you know, out of respect.
Yeah.
Because I don't have a problem with that. You know, I don't have a problem going to mass, just out of respect, because it's a family tradition kind of thing.
No, Ryan, you have to make a stance. You have to say,
right,
I'm
right.
not going to that church. I hate that church.
Yeah.
Sorry.
How could you support the patriarchy? You know, it's just like it's prudence, right? It's just wise to
And
just,
it's love.
yeah, it's love. I don't consider myself a practicing member of this church anymore, or this religion, or anything close to it. But I'm here for my family. I'm here because I love my family. I love my mom. I love my dad. I want to set a good example for my sisters as best as I can by, you know, going when I show up. I did not do that this last time I visited. And I think it was kind of a natural thing because my family didn't really say anything, and they kind of, they were kind of like, okay, yeah, like they didn't expect me to. But for all the 12 years before that, every time I visit, which I'd say was an average of every 3 years, yeah, I'd go, but I didn't go
It's
this
funny.
last time.
I mean, you're in a good position because, I mean, I don't think that until now, I'm really not helping your situation, but no, really, thank you for talking.
Yeah.
But you can kind of like slip in through the cracks. I think that with my situation, because of who I was within that community, I'm not going to be able to just go back and be able to go to mass for my family and stuff like,
No,
that's
100%. Yeah,
that's not,
100%.
I can't. I'm like imagining, as you were talking, I'm imagining like people staring and like all the chaos that would cause. And
It's almost like a Russian gangster movie or something. It's like you've been marked.
literally.
Yeah, but when you're a priest, you've been marked.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And you can never unmark that.
You had a certain status, and
right. So it's where the fact that I left and fell or whatever, they're like, yeah, of course, Ryan. Yeah, we knew that was gonna happen. Come on, that guy looked stoned before he ever started smoking weed. Like, come on. I'll never forget that, man. But yeah, it was pretty clear. Like, okay, yeah, no surprise with Ryan, and then with you, it's like, oh, wait a minute, but he's a priest. And because of the weird, twisted way that Catholics look at priests, your hands are still going to be holy to them, and they're going to look at you as desecrating those hands, Yeah,
and the community is so small that everybody knows each other. And especially when you're in the, like a religious priest or monk or something, that like, everyone. Like I knew all the main families. I've been to all the churches, basically.
Here's how close the community is. And this is a special circumstance. So I want your viewers to know that this is not something that happens all the time in the SSPX. But so I left in 2010, worked multiple jobs, but I ended up starting to sell cars in Honolulu for Audi, Lamborghini, Ferrari. And this would have been 2016, maybe 17. I can't remember. It was either end of 2016 or early 2017. I haven't been to church in the longest time. It's not on the forefront of my mind at all. Mm-hmm. Not thinking about, it's just not a part of my life anymore. Mm-hmm. And I'm standing on the showroom floor, on the Audi showroom floor, just chatting it up with, coworkers. And I get a phone call from the receptionist saying, Ryan, there's a man here in a black dress to see you. And really? I immediately knew what it was. I immediately was like, my heart just sank. I was like, what? Like, there's a priest from the SSPX here. She didn't say that. She didn't say there's so-and-so from the SSPX here. She said there's a man.
There's a guy here that looks like Neo from the Matrix.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And I was like, all right, and I go out, and of course I shake his hand. We start talking. Great guy, totally. It's actually probably one of the few priests I'd ever just like sit down and have a beer with and, have a good old chat. Great guy. I can't even remember his name. But
great guy, not memorable.
Yeah, not memorable. No, I feel terrible. But it turned out that he was the priest that had been going to our family's chapel for a while. He was there temporarily. And then part of his circuit after that was every first and third or second and fourth Sunday, he would be in Honolulu, fly out to Hawaii. For those of you who don't know, Hawaii doesn't have very much SSPX presence at all. It's on some of the islands, there's no mass. And like where I live, there's only mass once a month. And I only know that because, again, I live right next to the church that has the SSPX mass.
Really?
Yeah, well, not right
Now?
next to. I used to live right down the street from it. When I just recently moved again, so now I'm further from it. But there's only one chapel on Maui that has an SSPX mass, and it's right down the street from where I used to live.
That's funny because for a few years, well, for about 2 years, um, I was living one street and maybe 7 blocks away from the SSPX church that I was in
Yeah,
here in Guadalajara.
that's crazy.
And
I
I was
remember
always like, every time I looked out my window, I was always like,
yeah. And remember I was telling you, I moved to Hawaii. I'm thinking I'm, what is that, 6,000 miles away, 5,000, whatever it is, miles away from the SSPX. I go to UH. I get my first semester there, I was in the dorms. There's a middle school right next to the university. And when I just got curious to look up where the SSPS mass in Honolulu was being held, sure enough, right at that middle school, like within 5-minute walking distance from my dorm.
wow.
So I felt way more nervous about it because I was like, if my parents find out I'm not going, or if anybody finds out I'm not going, and then they find out how easy it would have been for me to go, because I was hoping for
roll out of bed.
Yeah, like I was hoping for an excuse of like, oh well, it's it's a 45-minute drive away. I don't have a car, like da, 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 da. But no, it was the building right next to the university. It's like, oh, how am I going to get away with this? But anyways, guy shows up, priest, great guy, but it was very clear that he was trying to spark something up in me again.
Mm-hmm.
And he gave me his number and he was very gracious. And then I think he left me a voicemail again like a month later. And I feel terrible. I could have just been his friend, but I knew that any time spent with him was going to be him trying to get me back.
Yeah. Like,
so
there's always that
there's always going to be that.
Yeah.
Especially, and not even on a personal level. That's his job. He's a priest.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So it wouldn't have even been like, dude, back off. It would have just been like, hey man, like you have no jurisdiction here kind of thing.
There was a priest that I was really close to in the seminary. Well, he wasn't a priest yet, but now he is.
Right.
And he started talking to me after I left, and he's like, listen, I'm not here to, like, I just want to keep a connection with you. Is that okay? Like, I don't want to separate. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's perfectly fine. And we would talk about everything and even what happened and everything. I was really open with him. Come to find out that he was giving updates to his the his superior. And I felt like at one side of me was like, obviously, like this is what he's trying to do. He has to tell people what's happening. But I felt like betrayed again.
Yeah.
And now I don't, at this moment, I don't want any connection. Some priests have reached out like, hey, I'm thinking about you. Happy Thanksgiving or whatever. And I don't even respond because it's not that I don't appreciate the idea, but I can't at this moment even go back.
One of the biggest downfalls of that community is the gossip.
Yeah.
The gossip.
Amongst the priests, Ryan, you wouldn't even,
I don't even want to know.
You thought that it's bad in our little church. Oh no.
I'm sure. Well, because the church, right? That's the group of people, everything, the priest absorbs all the info, right? And then they go back to the seminary on the weekend or whatever church they're based at on the weekend, talk to the other priests. They all have their stories. And before you know it, you live in North Carolina, you got to move to Pennsylvania. You go to that church, that priest already knows everything about you. I'll never forget. I can't remember what priest it was, but it was a priest. I had heard his name a lot. And I think this was at boys camp, or maybe boys camp would have been too early. It was at some function. And the priest was like, oh, yes, you're Ryan Arcia, the climber. I've heard a lot about you. And I was just like, wait, what? Like, how? And then it hit me like, oh, it's like you were saying, our priest at that time was kind of focused on me doing those sorts of things. I realized, oh, he just like told you about me. And you would think that would make you feel good. Like, oh, he's talking about me. But it made me feel like why do you, this priest I don't even know? You know, I guess when you're in Novus Ordo, a priest is just the guy at the church, you know, and the SSPX is such a like national and international community that there's people who rave about priests that are in states that they've probably never met.
Mhm.
You know, there was never anything like that in Novus Ordo that I could remember, you know, where people were so focused on the priests. Like I think you and I joked about this before, and sorry, not sorry to all you SSPX people. The SSPX should have like a deck of cards for their priests, and then just have, you know,
like trading cards.
Yeah, of trading cards. And that's what it felt like, you know.
They were celebrities.
Yes, it is very much like almost like, hey, could I get your autograph? That was like going and getting a blessing from a particular priest. It was like getting their autograph, you know.
That's funny. I'm reminded of kind of the environment at the seminary where there was this tendency for the seminarians to try to one up each other in certain things. Like,
I remember you mentioning that.
yeah, like I pray longer than you. I do this more than you. I do this. And it's like trying to get attention, trying to be that superhuman character that's going to be the extreme warrior to go out and help the community. And I mean, some of them just didn't care, and I respect those people because they were just being themselves. But yeah, there was definitely that you had to give the sermon that was intellectually stirring, but also approachable by people less intelligent than you. But also someone who's more educated will get something, you know, like all this BS. And
there's a lot of hot air in the world of priests for some reason. And I think it's because their world is so isolated. They don't see, like, because when they go to a church, right, especially the SSPS churches that travel, those lay people are so excited and thankful to have a priest come and say mass for them who travels by airplane every weekend, you know. So of course there's like this is our guy, you know. So, and I don't think they do it on purpose, but then they take that back to, you know, wherever they're stationed at, in the house full of other priests. And, you know, it's a subconscious thing. I'm the priest in my chapel, and you're the priest of your chapel too. We're priests of chapels. Not at all that that's their intention, and not that I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but like, I think there can be kind of that attitude of, I definitely witnessed it. I mean, priests where it was like, okay, like, you know, take your unaccredited master's in theology, and you know, it just, it's frustrating, man. It's frustrating.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
that's a whole other thing too.
Yeah, I think we could just go on and on and on like we normally do. Our conversation usually lasts a few hours.
Yeah, because there's just so much to unpack and like rehash. I would just say that, and this is speaking for myself, and you can maybe talk about your side of it. I would say for me, at the end of the day, I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm happy I left the church. That's not the attitude I have. I'm just happy that I went on my own path. I made my decisions for myself. The things I believe today, I believe because I've seen them, experienced them, or just know them to be true through logic and science or whatever. I know some people are going to hate that, but that's how I feel. And I am a truly happy person on the inside. Like, this is actually a side note, everybody. I've been dealing with a lot of people in my life right now who are going through a lot of mental anguish and mental health issues. And I feel so fortunate to not have that.
Stop talking about me.
And I feel so fortunate to not have that, but also like, I feel like a good reason, one of the reasons I don't have that is because of that foundation that we talked about. Like, I kind of know where my happiness comes from.
Center.
Right. I know my center. or at least I have a pretty good idea of what it is.
Right.
You know, it's not perfect, obviously, but like, and your center is always slightly shifting, but I've got a pretty good thing going. And I'm not going out every weekend, you know, sleeping with a bunch of different people, you know, going out and doing drugs all the time. You know, like it doesn't have to be that. Like so many people think you leave this structure, this religion, this regiment, that you're just going to go off the rails and that you're too weak as a human to be strong on your own.
To do anything good.
Yeah. And I think that's the worst and biggest lie that the church perpetuates, is that you were born innately evil and you have absolutely no power on your own to change any sort of evil within you. And the moment you take that away from somebody, you now just give them an excuse, you know. Whereas if you put it on a person, like, no, you have the ability to change this. You're not evil. You're just being a dick or whatever it is.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, don't get me wrong. There's evil people out there who truly are evil, but not every human being is born that way.
Mm-hmm.
And that paradigm in my life was probably one of the biggest things that separated me from the church. Was like, you don't, like, if you're sitting here saying that I was born evil, so I can't do anything good without help, you've already cut one leg off. You know, you've taken away the most important thing from the very beginning, which is your ability as an individual to make yourself better on your own.
Yeah, I think,
and I don't think people don't need anything. We need support in all like aspects.
yeah.
We need companionship, partnership, a healthy lifestyle, all of that. But at the end of the day, like, I just knew deep down that I was not evil. You know, original sin is just this concept to me, just to put it plain and simply, is just a way to be like, you don't have control, so give it to me.
Yeah, like practically, I mean, theologically, they wouldn't say that, and they would call you heretical. So agnostic and heretical.
Right.
But practically speaking, and that's something that I try to explain to people, that even though you can logically, in that framework of Catholicism, explain certain concepts, in the practical application, it doesn't play out like that. Like,
No.
because we're simple. We're very, I mean, we're complex organisms, whatever, but,
Yeah.
but our reactions and our way of behaving is more simple than that. So if you talk about, there's a distinction between wounded and pure evil, it's like, okay, logically I can see what you're saying, because nothing could be pure evil or whatever.
Right.
But practically speaking, like, what does that do in my life when I can't resist an urge? It's like, oh, that's original sin. You know, it's like there's so many practical applications of that. And when you see yourself in a cycle, a perpetual cycle, and you're like, how am I going to get out of this cycle? I'm supposedly I'm doing what I should be doing, but obviously I'm not doing what I should be doing because I'm doing this and not this. And, you know, it's all these things that psychologically mess us up. And for people that are, that have more of like willpower and like commitment to certain things, and they can prevent themselves from doing something, it's like, great, but that was a natural quality that you were born with. And for other people, it's a lot harder, and there's really no, I mean, there's no remedy for that, really. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, there is, but then there's not. I mean, it's just, practically speaking, it doesn't play out as beautifully as in the text. Anyway, but thank you, Ryan, and happy early birthday.
Oh yeah, thanks, man.
Your birthday's coming up in a few days. You're
Yep.
1 month older than me.
Yep. Always had that going for me.
Yeah.
Like, we're the same age, but I'm a month older.
Yeah, for a month, you're 1 year older.
And technically, yeah, because the year's different too, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I'm 88, he's 89.
I know.
So.
That's okay, but I'm younger, and it's good to be the younger one now that we're older.
Right. Now I'm the old guy. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, and both of us will be looking in the comments, I'm sure, and what everyone writes. Let us know about your experiences and any comments that you want to give. And like the video, subscribe, and all of that. So thank you,
All
Ryan.
right.